The Tom Woods Show, episode 1874.
Prepare to set fire to the index card of allowable opinion. Your daily dose of liberty education starts here. The Tom Woods Show.
Hey everybody, Tom Woods here. Eric July's back with us today. Man, Eric does so darn much. We're going to talk about all the different things this guy does. You can find him at The Blaze TV. He is the front man for the band Backwards, a metal band that has some rap elements that had a very successful first album, Veracity. And in terms of his libertarian work, he could not possibly be more sound and hardcore and great. He produces an enormous amount of content. He's a young whippersnapper, and I'm sure this was the highlight of his career. He was the MC for the 1,000th episode event I did for the Tom Woods Show back in 2017 in Orlando. The 2,000th episode coming up October 16th of this year. Don't forget. And he's been doing particularly good work in recent months on all the craziness that's been going on. So I thought it is ridiculous I haven't talked to Eric in a while. So here he is back again. Eric, welcome back.
Of course, Tom. Thanks for having me yet again, man. I always love doing this.
Well, thanks. It's always great to have you. I want to, in a way, introduce you to a new segment of my audience because I don't remember the last time we talked. But since then, the world turned upside down and I got a lot more listeners because people were tuning in to hear about what was going on with the virus and the so-called public health establishment, and they stayed for the other stuff. So some of them may not know Eric July. What I want to know is how you balance all these different things. You've had a tremendous couple of years where you were already doing well, but now your star has risen even more, and yet somehow you're managed to balance what I can see four things. You've got your music, you've got libertarianism, and then you've got comics and gaming. How does one person do all that and yet do it well enough that people follow you for all four reasons?
Well, it's one of those things where, look, I'm a worker. I've always been one. And what's obviously seeing that early success with the music stuff earlier, certainly in my early and mid 20s, what it did was allow me to basically have the time to do other things, right? So generally when you do music stuff, it happens in like pockets, right? It's like throughout the year. It's you go on a tour, but that tour it lasts for, a month or something like that, 30 days. Or you go do an album that you only go to record the album, 2 weeks or something like that. So what I was able to do in finding that success was walk away from other projects that weren't necessarily in terms of the time being allotted to these other different things that I always really had aspirations of doing. I just never had the time to do. And I'm not, people that, meet me certainly know this. I'm not one of those guys that generally does the whole, I'm going to kick it and do these kind of things that I consider like more leisure things. Those don't really exist for me. What I like to do, I have then turned it in a way that I can not only just showcase it, but build a community certainly around it. So waking up early, grinding really late is the way that I've been able to do it. But most importantly, the thing that makes it so easy for me to do is because I thoroughly enjoy what it is that I do. So all of those things that you named off are things that are not only important to me, they've been a part of my life for a very long time. So it doesn't feel like work. And obviously that's the best kind of work where you can just get up and just do it and not have to feel as if there's going to be tedious things to do here and there. But for the most part, I never feel like I'm like working per se, though I know I actually am. So just the sheer attitude of not believing that I always have to try to make free time for this sort of leisure stuff because emotionally or mentally, I'm already in the space that I need to be when I'm doing the work it is that I do. So that's
isn't that a great place to be, honestly? And then you came to my house late last year for one of my supporters events, and I just loved the fact that we were able to, because you live near a major airport and I live near a major airport, so you were able to one morning get on a plane, get over here, do this event with me, and then by the next morning be right back home with your beloved, with a pile of cash in your pocket. I mean, and what kind of a life is that? That's great. Now, the thing is, though, all four of these things that you're interested in all four of them, you see SJWism creeping into. Like, they just won't let you leave. They won't leave you alone. They won't let you have one interest where you can just peacefully enjoy it. So, for instance, you just made a video about, now, and look, I don't follow any of this. If I wouldn't have known about this if it hadn't been for social media. But this whole Red Skull thing and it clearly being a Jordan Peterson spoof, you just made a video about that. Can you explain that for those of us who aren't in the know?
Yeah, so Ta-Nehisi Coates, he's a writer. He's a very bad one too, but it just kind of goes to show where we're at with Marvel Comics right now. And he somehow stumbled upon getting a gig where he gets to write the futures of both Captain America and Black Panther, despite there being no evidence that he was ever a comic book guy prior to this, to getting this project or anything like that. He had just, he's a social commentator, political commentator, leftist, and now he gets to write these guys. In his Captain America run, he wrote Red Skull. Red Skull was in it, and you know him as the classic sort of villain of Captain America, Hydra, leader of Hydra, and Ta-Nehisi Coates thought it was a great idea to have him basically saying what Jordan Peterson has says, particularly with his sort of 12 rules and the sort of managing chaos and what have you. And he just is literally repeating that. So it's not like you can't even say that it's analogous because it's about as on the nose as you possibly can get. I mean, in that regard. So yes, they turn what this Hydra leader and generally being tied to the Nazis as a Jordan Peterson spoof. It just goes to show how they feel about guys like Jordan Peterson. But most importantly, it shows how crazy this industry certainly has gotten now to where, yeah, we know they have no issues just sitting here calling whoever they want Nazis. I mean, that's certainly par for the course right now. But yeah, like you mentioned, they don't let anybody have anything. So yeah, they will hijack these characters, and then that's what they do with them, have them acting as if in ways that they shouldn't even be acting. That's nothing like who they have historically been. But when you get to fail upward, that's sort of the projects that you get a hold of. You get a hold of Black Panther and Captain America, and then you get to make Jordan Peterson a Red Skull spoof, which is insane in itself.
Well, particularly because of all the things Jordan Peterson has done, his 12 Rules for Life book is about as, frankly, inoffensive as you could ask for. I mean, really, anybody who could be outraged at a book basically encouraging people to bring order to their lives is a little bit on the sensitive side.
Oh, most definitely. Isn't that crazy, though? That's what makes this whole ordeal about as insane as it possibly can. And this was the point that I was making when I was doing the videos, because of all, like Jordan Peterson, to me, you know what I mean? He's not a rough around the edges guy. And I always thought it to be so bizarre that he just drives the left just crazy.
Yeah, I was thinking if you don't like Jordan Peterson, you are going to hate Eric July.
Yeah, exactly.
Tom Woods, right?
Exactly. It's like we're way more. We'll say anything. I mean, and I wouldn't even say that we are. I mean, they make us controversial, but certainly Jordan Peterson is like 12 notches down below us.
Plus, he's super polite and everything.
Yeah.
And, you and I try to be polite.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what makes it crazy that of all people, they pick him and make an enemy out of him, and they try to paint him certainly in that light. And I'm sitting there like, what in the world is going on? I will say this. He's handled it about as well as you possibly could. He had shared this hilarious photo, basically, of the Hydra symbol. And it's the lobster thing that he's, always talking about. Yeah. And he was like Hell Lobster or something like that. So he's certainly making fun of them. And he showed pictures of like Red Skull repeating some of the like inoffensive things that he says, and showing him saying that. And it's hilarious. And he's been handling that well. But I think it says more about the guys like the Ta-Nehisi Coates of the world and those sort of real social justice writers and whatnot. And not only how they think about folks that they consider their adversary and just how quick to the trigger they certainly are to pull it no matter who you are. As inoffensive as you may be, they just need to paint you as the absolute worst of the worst because God forbid they actually are the ones that are the baddies.
Now, DC and Marvel are the giant companies. So I guess what I want to know is, since I'm completely outside of this world, are there independent comic makers out there? And if so, are there any you follow who you think are particularly good?
Yeah, I mean, there has been certainly guys that, I mean, people know the dark horses of the world, the Images and like but I would still consider them part of the big major deal of comic books. But the main big two, of course, are Marvel and DC. And those other companies and they exist that aren't nearly as big. But the industry is in a weird spot right now. And I actually love it because it's creating opportunity. This is going to be one of my big ventures. But you mentioned guys that exist right now. And one I think, that I could point to is Ethan Van Sciver. And for those that aren't familiar with Ethan Van Sciver, he has been he's an artist. I mean, and an absolutely killer one. He's done a lot of the Green Lantern stuff with DC. And certainly what he's known for, but he's also done X-Men for Marvel in terms of artists. He was a kind of ostracized for the, painting. He was he wasn't he's not like a libertarian or anything. He was a Trump guy, but he got ostracized from the industry certainly recently, and he ended up going fully independent. And Cyberfrog, he did Cyberfrog 2. It's a comic book character that he started back in the 90s, but he, brings him back. Cyberfrog Rick Flannick to Cyberfrog 2, and he makes $1 million off it. He's like the highest grossing, certainly crowdfunded campaign on Indiegogo for a comic book in terms of what he did at the time and what he's been able to do. So you're seeing guys like him who have been able to understand that there has been it's the same thing that the music industry is still going through and had to go through, where whether it be with the internet and all these sorts of other avenues and channels in which you are able to basically be a creator in that space and not have to go through the traditional mediums in order to get the work out there. Right? That's what these sites have allowed people to do. This is what we have been able to do with music. And I love it. So you're seeing guys like Ethan who have been able to make more money than they've ever made as writers or artists for Marvel and DC, but they're also independent from them, owning their own characters and what have you. So you're starting to, I think you're going to see certainly this revolution in that regards. I think still, though, the industry has to figure out from the, I guess, not just the distribution element of that, because a lot of people are keeping that in-house, like Ethan has his all caps comics, but also the expense certainly of it, because it's not cheap, obviously, to make a comic book, but, every Wednesday you can go pick up a book for $3.99, $4.99 or whatever. So it's relatively cheap in that regards. The industry is trying to find out certainly how to do that. That will be an advantage that the Marvels, the DCs, and the others of the world certainly have, but they're figuring it out. And there are independent creators that are doing their thing. And this is, like I said, this is my next big venture. I'm trying to step in that as well.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's good to hear all around. Now, I want to switch gears to music, because that, other than libertarianism, is the thing you do that I'm most interested in.
Yes.
And I want to talk specifically, because we've talked about your music before, and there's more to be said. I want to talk specifically right now about, what happened in 2020. I mean, we all know, obviously, how devastating that was. We also know that most bands seem, at least in public, to have been perfectly okay with that. And I know that there are a lot of small venues that have struggled. I'm sure some of them have closed. There's one not too far from me that was on the verge of closing, and they put up a GoFundMe, and I sent them a big fat check to keep. And this is a venue, Eric, by the way, I've never even been to. I hope to get to someday. But in principle, I just want these small venues to stay open and hang in there. And now I am seeing some bands announcing that they are launching a tour.
Yeah.
And in fact, next week at the Verona, which is not too far from, a couple hours from where I am, a band called Deicide is performing there. Now they cross a line for me, so I would refuse to go to see them.
Yeah.
But they're a major band, and the fact that there's going to be a concert in a few days featuring them is a big deal. So do you think that it is turning around, or is it too early to say?
I think it's still too early to say because these, definitely these artists feel like they have to sort of have this 1 foot in, 1 foot out because all of them want to tour because let's be realistic, they're broke. That's how a lot of them make their money. Period. I mean, they don't own half these guys don't own their records or anything like that. So they're making all their money off the tour and the merchandise. They know that's what they need to get back into doing. Yet they're trying to save. Unfortunately, a lot of these musicians have appealed to this mob of weirdos. So they're trying to keep this 1 foot in, 1 foot out, despite knowing the reality of the situation. I couldn't tell you the amounts of people even out here in Dallas who are connected to like our particular genre, who they sit here and put up a front for everybody else. Like on the internet, be it on Twitter or whatever, you wear your mask, blah, 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 all types of stupid stuff. And they either know they understand and they're hurting, or they definitely in spots like Texas where you're allowed to do that, they're still throwing venues under, throwing, whatever to try to make ends meet, which I have absolutely no problem with it. But damn, get to doing it, right? And you mentioned that this has been a tough year, not only for the artists, but especially the venues, with them closing down in the way that they have been. I can't tell you the different amounts that of venues out here in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex that have not shut down and we're going to reopen. No, they're done. Like, they're done. They tried dipping into their savings and everything, and they just couldn't remain afloat. So I like to be some sort of optimistic about it. We know 2020 was supposed to be the year our second album dropped. We just couldn't drop it. It would be suicide to drop a sophomore album and not be able to
tour.
Yeah, so that was insane. So we had to, of course, hold that off. But I'd like to think that in some capacity that's true. But these guys got to get this 1 foot in, 1 foot out nonsense out of the way and get to actually just getting out there and doing it. The world is not going to fall apart. The sky isn't going to fall in because you throw a show, make people happy, and they get to do their thing and be amongst other people like normal, rational human beings.
Well, I'll tell you something. I'm sure there are bands thinking if we announce a tour, we're going to get half our fans upset that we're not following the public health guidelines or any of that stuff. I'm sure that there is some concern about that. But I'll tell you this. When Deicide announced they were coming to the Verona, that sold out in about 5 seconds. Like we all have to be 5 feet, 6 feet away from each other. That was out the window. Nobody cared. That place is going to be packed.
Of course, wall to wall.
So they do have that. Now, the other thing I want to know is, typically a band like yours, or really All That Remains, any of the friendly bands that we know, but really any band at all in this kind of genre of metal tends not to tour alone. They tour with other bands, but with some exceptions. Like Machine Head did a tour by themselves, and that was the second to last concert I went to before everything closed down. But generally, you're going to tour with other bands. Now, how much of a problem is that right now? If you were to try to put a tour together, it wouldn't just be, well, I got to make sure I got venues to perform at, but would also be, I got to find bands that are actually ready to go on the road.
Yeah, that would be definitely ones that draw. I think you'd have smaller bands that are that are willing to do it. But definitely bands that are going to draw. It's going to be difficult because, like you had mentioned earlier, a lot of them are trying to save face, and they don't. Some of their fans are going to be, they're all about the COVIDs and everything, so they're gonna treat this as if you're doing criminal things. And unfortunately, that's a corner that a lot of them paint themselves in. We could announce it and it wouldn't matter. Like the people that hate us, they already hate us. So it's not like it would matter. So it would have to be trying to find those instances like the All That. It would have to be like a backwards All That Remains type of thing, Fit for a King type of thing, where you have guys that are within these deals that are proud enough and don't care really what it is that people have to say. So that would be another problem, and that is going to be another problem. So as long as people are doing this, I think what maybe we'll see is what we need to see is maybe some prime examples of again, people getting on the road and doing their thing and the sky not falling, and then people just, because they're sheep, it's like, oh, well, I guess it's not that bad, and I guess I can go, I don't know, have fun again. Before we can kind of get to some sort of, I don't want to say even normalcy, but back to what the industry was in terms of how we put together tours and whatnot. But a lot of these artists have painted themselves in the corner, and they have tried to appease this mob of weirdos. even if it hurt their pockets. So even if they want to get back on the road, they're sitting here consciously, or maybe even subconsciously thinking about the fact that they're going to make some people mad.
Hey, folks, I want to say a quick word on behalf of maybe the most important sponsor I've ever had, and that's BetterHelp. A lot of you out there are struggling with depression, anxiety, stress, relationships, dealing with family conflicts, and you look on social media and it looks like everybody else has a perfect life and you're the outlier. Well, I'm telling you, you are not alone, and help is available. BetterHelp will assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist. You connect in a safe and private online environment. It's convenient, professional, and affordable. You can start communicating in under 24 hours. This is not self-help, it's professional counseling. You get timely and thoughtful responses to messages you can send anytime, plus you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions. The testimonials are out of this world, and in fact, so many people have been using BetterHelp that they're recruiting additional counselors in all 50 states. I want you to start living a happier life today. As a listener, you'll get 10% off your first month by visiting betterhelp.com/woods. Join over 1 million people taking charge of their mental health. Again, that's BetterHelp, HELP.com/woods. How did it happen that you were able to get a band together that, if judging from the themes on your album Veracity, that did very well, generally all look at the world the same way, and it's a very unusual way, our way. How did that happen?
That was I know, there's not, I obviously believe in, me being Christian and me believing in God. I don't know what other way to put it in terms of that. It was just, we were all placed in the same place at the same time. It doesn't, the way that happened, I don't see how anybody other than God could have orchestrated, because me and Alex were obviously, we're the two vocalists, the two front men of the, me being the front man, but him being the other vocalist of it. So we're the two most prominent members of the band, and he's also an anarcho-capitalist, right? And it wasn't one of those things like that, okay, I went and handpicked the guy because of that. No, it was, hey, we're starting this band. I need a guy that can play bass, that can also hold a note. And one of our close friends, Ray, he was like, hey, I know this guy. I know this guy that he's, because this is when I was living in Corpus Christi still. So that's even more of a small market. It ain't like it's just killer musicians that are, well, I guess Selena. But aside from that, it ain't like it's just killer musicians that are coming out of Corpus Christi. And, I link up with Alex at, of course, the most Corpus Christi, Texas thing. I first met Alex at a freaking Whataburger, and we're sitting here chatting about everything, and I'm pitching the ideas to him. And obviously, because we were already like, he got it almost immediately. So that in itself was just random, but it was, it's what happened. I tell people that story, and they're like, oh, you didn't just go hand pick him because he was an anarcho. No, it wasn't like I put out a notice on, I don't know, Craigslist or something at the time. And I was like, hey, we're starting an ANCAP band. If you're an anarcho-capitalist and a musician, hit me up. They said, what happened? If you're a libertarian and a musician, go hit me up. That was not what happened. It was just, we had all came together and we just happened to be like-minded. And it just happened organically. The other guys, our producer, who is still our producer, and Corey, they knew him and they had left their previous band. And they were like, okay, we're trying to, we want to start this band. We know I just left Fire, and they had pitched it to me. Corey had actually pitched it. He was like, hey, I know these groups of guys. They want to make a band that's more so hand and glove fit for how you can do vocals. Because that was back when I was doing I was one of the few guys in like kind of the metalcore scene that was doing like the metal and like the singing and the screaming, but also would mix like a bunch of rap elements as well. So they wanted to make like a hand and glove fit. And again, it just so happened to have like Kevin, who of course is still in the band, and him just being just as like-minded and wanting to create and have something be great. But again, it happened. It wasn't like it was a notice or something that I put out.
Your life's really amazing, man, because you got this Blaze TV gig. They happen to be physically located in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. That's where you already live, of all possible places in the country. It just falls into your lap. That's almost not fair. You want to give advice to people, But yet in your own life, it's, well, let's see, divine providence just dropped this in my lap. So there's my advice. Go get yourself some divine providence.
That's, again, I in some aspects of my life, there's nothing else no other being that I could credit that to other than, like I say, like that's got to be proof that there's a man upstairs doing or kind of orchestrating things, because a lot of stuff, you're right, has fallen directly in my lap. A lot of the hand from the band onto, like you mentioned, with a lot of the Blaze stuff, it's stuff that I just happen to be at the right place at the right time. In addition to, and I had obviously the know to take advantage of those situations. But yeah, a lot of that stuff is just me being put in the right places and me taking advantage of what it is that I've had.
I don't mean to harp on this one issue, but I am so desperate for live music that I have to harp on it a little bit.
Yeah.
Are you guys at least thinking about, I mean, if not planning anything, are you at least in the starting to chit chat with each other stage? Because I mean, I know obviously you need to have other bands with you. You need bands that can draw. I mean, look, I could put a band together, it wouldn't draw anybody, right? So you need bands that are actually going to draw people. Yeah. Actually, it might draw people just because they would need to see it with their own eyes.
Yeah,
right?
But
you know what I
draw,
mean.
Actually,
yeah, that's right. Yeah, so that doesn't quite work. But you get my point. I know you need that, but you also need a whole bunch of venues, and I don't know how many dates you need on a tour to make the books balance. But I do know that Florida's totally open, and all these venues are desperate for bands. And probably when you pass through Florida, you might not normally go to every single possible venue. But right now, you could probably put together a Florida tour.
Absolutely.
Every single venue, and everybody would be desperate for
Absolutely.
it and clamoring to get in. So come on, do it.
Yeah, that is, we've pondered on that idea. It's just a matter of kind of making this make sense in terms of with the new music and everything popping off. I got the tape that I'll be recording here like within the week. And I'm excited for that because that'll get put out. We got like a kind of song that won't be on the second album that we're probably putting out. And then we'll kind of get people back used to getting, seeing backwards and us doing our thing. And that's one of the things that I had talked about was the band had talked about like doing like a run in Texas and doing a run in Florida where we just cover the whole state. We'd imagine we can make that be lucrative in some way. You get people from out of town that will want to come there to check us out as well, because like you said, they're desperate for music. So that's something that we've already discussed. We've been discussing that for a little bit now. It's just making this not only make sense with the dollars, but also making it make sense for like how we kind of put out the music to get people back to knowing that, okay, Backwards is back and rocking. So it's just making it make sense. But a Florida tour, realistically speaking, is or in a Texas tour, realistically speaking, those are things that could happen.
All right. Well, see, now I feel a lot better. Tell us about what you do over at the Blaze, and as you're doing that, how people can follow you there and see what you're putting out.
Well, yeah. So my the gig, if you will, with Blaze is that I'm contribute basically to everything it is that they do video wise. So you'll see me appear on just basically any show on any given day. It's just random. So a lot of the shows in which the day that we kind of rock this out, going to News and Why It Matters, and that's probably the show that people know me most. I'm a regular on that throughout the week, but also showing up on everybody else. Been doing Matt Kiwi's show, doing Stu's show, doing everybody else's show, radio there as well. But anything that has to do with video, I throughout the week you'll see me appearing. There on coming in the studio and rocking those out, be the panelist or whatever it is that I'm doing. And of course, you can get a lot of that stuff and everything over at Blaze TV, and signing up, but also things like the News and Why It Matters. Well, that airs. That's one of the public shows, so that airs Facebook, YouTube, and everything there. You'll be able to see me throughout the week on the News and Why It Matters if that's your thing. But if you sign up with Blaze, you'll see me just on virtually every show. It just depends on it. There's no rhyme or reason to it. It's one of those things where we link up Saturday, Sunday, talk about the upcoming weekend, and I just start appearing on random shows. And it's a sweet and awesome gig for me to be able to do that and exposing a audience to some of the things that that obviously I believe in and being able to chime in on that. And I love it because I've been doing it for a while now. And Blaze, like I say all the time, Blaze is never. I mean, it wouldn't work either way, but they've never expected me to like kind of tone things down or not say certain things. That's never been on the table. It's just they like the idea that I come in and I say what it is that I'm feeling, even if it's challenging other panelists or what have you. And it's an awesome gig because, again, I get to introduce so many people. So much of my success has been attributed to that audience hearing that. And they're like, oh, I never heard it worded like that. And then they end up being fans of my work. And it's a win-win situation for me.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, on the show notes page, I'm going to try to summarize all the things you're doing, or at least, link to Blaze TV, link to Backwards, all this stuff, be at tomwoods.com/1874. But let's conclude with maybe a more playful question that somebody submitted in my supporters group.
Yeah.
Is there a comic book character you most identify with?
Oh, man, that is a tough one. Most identify with. Those would be, I would consider that a separate question from who would be being my favorite.
Yeah, you could do that. If you have to cop out of this question, you can say what your favorite is.
It would be, the favorite would be, I want to just do some service to the person that asked the question, because that's a fantastic question. Because of that, I think it's a fantastic question because it separates favorite from most identified with. And I would have to say, man, that is so tough. I would have to say probably that people will at least know of, that people will be kind of familiar with. It would have to be, I guess, the Luke Cages of the world. The reason being is because with Luke Cage, despite him having these powers, of being superpowered, of bulletproof skin and all that sort of stuff, it's this street level conflict that he's always had to deal with, right? And it's like, whether it be in Harlem, being in different areas, and having to always deal with that conflict despite wanting to be greater and doing greater things, and wanting to do greater things. That's something that I can absolutely relate to the most, because, my upbringing and where I kind of come from. And there was a lot of conflict with me, with that coming from where I came from to getting to where it is that I'm certainly at now. I've always appreciated that sort of aspect with Luke Cage. And he's not the only one, but certainly he comes from more of a familiar background. So if I had to answer that question, it would have to be Luke.
All right, fair enough. Now, I guess I'll give as a link, because there's a lot of links we could give for you. First of all, tomwoods.com/1874 is where to follow up with more Eric July material. But I like following you on Twitter. I think you're fantastic on Twitter. You're just devastating, crushing, burning things down. It's so great to watch you on Twitter. So Eric D. July is where to follow Eric on Twitter. You got to get on there and do that. Now, Eric is over 92,000 followers now. We got to get him up to six figures. Come on, people. Give Eric the Tom Woods Show bump over on Twitter. And I know some of you think, I don't like Twitter. Because, look, nobody likes Twitter. All right? We all admit that. Okay? And we don't like they've been better than Facebook and YouTube when it comes to the virus. That's for darn sure.
Yeah, I don't think I've gotten banned, at least at all, from anything. On the saying anything COVID, though I have gotten strikes on YouTube though for it. So.
Yeah, YouTube. Yeah, I've struggled there, and Facebook. Yeah. They won't let you say anything. Even though I just showed that the most recent thing from the World Health Organization on masks is very timid. They say, as of now, there is only inconsistent and inconclusive scientific evidence about the benefits of masking healthy people. I mean, that's not me making that up or pulling it out of context. That's what they say. But if you were to say that on YouTube, you would almost certainly get your video taken down. But that's what their own source says. Whereas on Twitter, most of the time, now there have been some people who have been removed absolutely unjustifiably, but of the terrible, horrible villains out there, Twitter is only Mussolini.
Exactly.
Hitler and Stalin are Facebook and YouTube, but only Mussolini, I would say, on Twitter. So follow Eric over there at Eric D. July, and continued success, Eric. Thanks a lot.
I appreciate you having me. We'll do it again soon enough.
All right, everybody, before we go, I have a little favor to ask you folks. I haven't done this in, I checked, 6 years, but I'm going to ask you a favor. It will take you only 30 seconds, but if I could have some of you do this just as a favor to me, it would really, really help me. It's a survey, just a demographic survey, so I'll get a sense of who's listening to the show. Now, I insist to you that it is absolutely anonymous. that the answers are not matched up with email addresses or anything. I never see anybody's email address or anything like that. All I get is the aggregate numbers. I just want to know. It helps me. It helps sponsors. I just like to know who's listening out there. And this survey would really help a lot. So as I say, the only thing I will get is a list of percentages that Libsyn will send me. Libsyn is the platform I use to store the episodes, and they're the ones who do the survey for me. So if you could take just a second to do this, I would be extremely grateful. Very simple questions. You'll find it at tomwoods.com/survey. So please do that for me as a favor, and I'll see you all tomorrow.
Become a smarter libertarian in just 30 minutes a day. Visit tomwoods.com to subscribe to the show for free, and we'll see you next time.
Like the sound of The Tom Woods Show? My audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.